Hola, and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation usually seriously. But tonight, on our first edition of Overly Animated After Dark, we're going to let our hair down a little bit and have more of a free-flowing conversation about an animated topic. Like our ancestor podcast, the Drunk Minions podcast that you can also find on overlyanimated.com and our assorted feeds, this will probably include some not safe for work language, so be warned. I'm your host, Alex Bonilla, and today I'm joined by Jillian Hysen, Sam Quattro, Beatriz Mourad, Andy Potter, and Sarah Dolman. Say hi, everybody.
Is that your Rango voice?
Yeah, what is that? I was expecting what?
It's my After Dark voice, guys.
Don't stop doing it.
You're not going to let us say hi for ourselves?
Like, yeah, say hi, everybody.
Hello.
No, okay, no more Rango impressions, but yeah, we're all here. It's just too many.
Hi, I'm Sam.
Howdy, y'all. My name's Miss Beans.
Oh.
Beatrice spoils it a little, but we're going to be talking about the animated classic Rango. You can find more about this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can also subscribe to our feed at iTunes at overlyanimated.com/iTunes or on YouTube at overlyanimated.com/YouTube. Wherever you listen to us, so always feel free to leave us any reviews or comments. So we always appreciate that. But today we're talking about an animated film released in early 2011, a co-production between Paramount and Nickelodeon Pictures. This went on to win the only non-Disney Best Animated Feature Academy Award of the past 10 years, and I'm talking about the forgotten Gore Verbinski classic Rango.
The first one that won that award was Shrek.
Yes, the Shrek one. Early on in the category, there was a variety. We also had stuff like Spirited Away to win, Wallace and Gromit. But Rango is the last movie that was not made by Disney or Pixar to win the whole thing. So Rango is an important piece of animation history, and I, for a long time, have had a special connection to it. This was one of my formative movies in terms of my style of humor, as well as my just my general enjoyment of animated films. So I made people of the podcast watch it under the influence of various substances, whether that be beer or wine or chocolate or other things. So here they are to give their takes on a movie that I, for a long time, loved. Watching it now, it's a different perspective, obviously. But we'll go around the room here. We'll start with Dylan, since he's usually the voice who greets you on the beginning of the podcast. So, we'll at least give him second voice here. Dylan, what did you think about this experience watching the timeless classic Rango?
Yeah, you said classic. According to whom is that? Is that a classic? You?
According to animation historians.
No, isn't that us? Aren't we supposed to decide that?
Theoretically, yes, but okay, well
I guess you're declaring it. So we just watched this all together.
Yes. I guess I should have mentioned that as well. Yeah.
It was quite the experience because this movie is very fucking weird and didn't really make sense in this setting. I missed most things that happened. I mean, it was visually interesting. We frequently commented on the animals' appearances while we were watching. I was not really a fan of most of the characters or the plot. I guess overall I didn't like it, but this was not the optimal setting to view Rango, so I would not say this is an objective take.
I mean, being drunk is sometimes it can be the optimal conditions for watching a film.
Can it?
So
Alex, as our Rango expert, would you describe that as the optimal conditions for this movie?
Well, I think it might have been a little better if you were under hallucinogenic drugs.
Yeah, I think it would be better. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that would have been a little better. But also to mention something about the animation, another key thing to point out is that this is the only film that Industrial Light and Magic, the group behind the special effects in Star Wars and the Terminator movies and a lot of other movies, Pirates of the Caribbean, this is the only movie that they've ever done the animation on a feature film for. So the entire thing was animated by them, and they haven't done a movie since. So because of that, the style of animation is fairly unique. It's not a kind that you'll see very often in animation, so that certainly makes it stand out a little bit, for better or for worse. Beatrice, you're our film podcaster here at Overly Animated. You cover a lot of the more modern animated films. So what was your take on what we just watched here from 7 years ago?
It was basura. Say that as just, I don't know. Okay. So okay, I didn't watch it in the best conditions. I didn't drink throughout the film, but for me, the sound, I didn't hear quite well, so I had to rely on the subtitles, and it didn't really grab me. I like the color scheme of the movie, if that makes sense. I like how certain colors are vibrant, certain were not. Like, I liked that. But, there were just certain choices they made in terms of character design. There were certain choices they made in terms of vocal direction that I just didn't really like. And I just don't like when any type of Latinx culture is used as a prop, used as a backdrop. And it was just very evident that this film was written by a white guy, and it was annoying. The random Spanish was annoying. And I just, so it was exactly what I expected this movie to be.
Did you have expectations going into this movie at all?
I mean, I was just like, okay, this is probably going to be a ridiculous movie. Because I think I remember when it came out 7 years ago, I think I remember it bombing. I remember it just not getting the critical acclaim. So I already going in, I was like, okay, this was probably not going to be that great.
Okay, interesting. Actually, I did look this up. It made less money than the major animated movies of that year. It made less than Rio. It made less than Kung Fu Panda 2. It made less than Cars 2. It made less than Puss in Boots. But also, like, this was made by a company that otherwise does not make large feature animation, right? Like, this was Paramount's first time going out into animation before they spun off their own branch. Nickelodeon Pictures usually focuses on their own stuff, like the SpongeBob movie or the Hey Arnold movie. So, like, it's just a weird movie to analyze in terms of box office. Compared to other movies, it opened to number one at the box office, but it had a really weak slate to compete with. It was opening against The Adjustment Bureau, that, like, dumb Matt Damon movie, and Beastly, which had Vanessa Hudgens. Like, remember when Vanessa Hudgens was a thing?
Fun story.
But,
fun.
Beastly.
Okay, am I allowed, like, a very kind of slightly off-topic anecdote?
Sure.
Well, first, this movie had an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes and won the Oscar. I would not call it bombing by any respect.
So, like, compared to other animated movies, it didn't make as much money. But, like, in terms of critical consensus at the time, it was considered better than the other animated movies of that year. So, like, but, like, obviously watching it separated, like, just as a movie in itself, as opposed to comparing with other movies, it's obviously very different, right? So, like, we'll go to Sam over here. Sam, what?
Oh no!
What did you think about watching this movie?
Oh my god! Okay, so here's the disclaimer. I'm a really big lightweight, and I've been drinking since like a half hour before we started the movie, like 2 or 3 hours ago.
Success.
And so I'm at a point where I can't really remember. Okay, so I remember saying that, okay, I fucking hated it, like, the whole way through. But I didn't, of course. I feel like sober me would be, like, more fair to this movie. Be like, oh yeah, it had some clever moments, the animal to Western thing was good. But then drunk me is just like, why the fuck do they have, like, a Pepto-Bismol bottle as an outhouse, but they have, like, mini shotguns? Like, where'd they get that shit from? I don't know. There was shit with, like, homophobic jokes that weren't funny because it was, like, 2011 and everybody's still, like, gay. And it's like, like, who fucking cares about that kind of shit anymore, dude? It's 2011. Anyway.
Well, it's 2018 now, but, like, you're right. That back then, like, we should have probably been a bit more,
homophobia isn't fucking cool, even if you're goddamn, like, Verzimski or whatever.
That's a fair criticism.
I'm making such a fool of myself.
No, but that's a good perspective to have.
Anyway, this movie, I didn't think it was that good.
Okay.
It had a lot of hashtag aesthetic things that were a plus. But other than that, it was just like, oh, this guy, he's just like an outsider, and he's like the fucking sheriff of this town. He's gonna figure out all the woes and troubles of it, and it's not good. Of that, it's not a good genre of that type of movie, I would say.
All right, Sarah, you were also here. I don't. Were you drinking during this? I already forgot, but
I really didn't drink that much, despite what anyone may say.
Sure.
I really didn't, but I'm also like extremely tired.
Okay, that's
so
another form of deprivation of sensory stuff. So like,
right. Anyway, this movie, I also, like, similar to Beatriz, I couldn't really hear it very well. I was mostly just watching it through the subtitles, and I feel like that's probably not the best way to watch this movie, because I just couldn't really feel like I was, like, experiencing it. But, like, and when we started this movie, about 10 minutes in, I commented something like, this is just a whole bunch of nonsense, and it's like, it was, like, really dramatic and nonsense, and, like, I normally really love nonsense, but for some reason, it just didn't really click with me in this movie, and I don't know if it was just the way that, like, just the context in which we were watching it, but it all felt like it just wasn't totally hitting, but I do think that if I maybe was watching it and I was less tired and more trying to like pay attention to what was happening and maybe paying attention to the jokes, I would have enjoyed it a bit more. But it was still a very interesting experience to watch with everybody this evening.
Okay, so we've got now multiple mentions of aesthetic as a positive, but the rest of the stuff is bad, which is an appropriate opinion to have, I think. But finally, we'll go over to Andy. Hi, Andy. How are you? I hope you're doing well. I'm sorry. We have more than 4 people. Usually we have just 4 people, but today we have 5.
I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since we talked to Andy, since the beginning. It's already been like 10 minutes or 12 minutes.
Okay, just get Andy's
yeah,
opinion.
Okay. Well, Andy, what do you think here? Andy, are you here?
Oh my god. Hi.
How are you?
I'm not going to explain what happened, but I drank a little bit tonight. Not a lot. But I'm also recovering from kidney stones, so I'm in a lot of pain. Or not a lot of pain now, but I'm a little out of it.
But
yeah, no,
so
I'm
like
fine.
on this
fine,
present I gave you on your recovery from kidney stone,
yeah.
I allowed you to watch this film Rango.
You allowed?
Yeah, how did you receive this gift?
So I was watching this movie, and I just kept thinking, this movie kept stepping into the realm of absurd, but not really fully committing to it. Like, I've talked about this before in other podcasts, that, like, if you're going to be absurd, you have to go all the way. You have to just, because, like, this movie has a rattlesnake where its rattle is a gun.
Which is awesome.
It's so stupid. And, like, but, like, that's a good part of it. I wish the whole movie was like that absurd. But then we have other things that are just not as absurd. Like, they make, I don't know if I'm going to explain everything, but they have a real hawk in the movie. Like, it's just a hawk. Like, there's nothing else
but
weird
the
about
hawk uses a vending machine. Isn't that wacky?
That was funny.
But I was watching this movie and I just like kept thinking of like other movies that are absurd, like that I like better because they're absurd. Like, I was thinking about like Transformers. Transformers.
Wait, the Michael Bay version or the 1980s version?
No, the 1980s one. It has pop music, like it has music just jumping in. Like this movie, it's
absurdity.
It has people dying all over the place. It's completely absurd. It has Weird Al in it. They fly out of the eyeball of a planet-sized spaceship at one point, and they like. It's just completely absurd. This movie never reaches that absurdity. Oh, they say shit in that movie, and it's PG. That's a weird movie.
Well, like here they say hell like a lot, I guess, and
they talk about
the 80s were weird.
Like, it's just so, but at the same time, it's just so weirdly paced. Like, I'm never bored at all during like a movie like Transformers. This movie, I was bored so much. Like, I was just waiting for stuff to happen, and nothing. And I think my favorite part of the movie is everything after Rattlesnake Jake kicks Rango out of the town, because it's at least stuff is moving forward. But before that, everything's just like, I know where this is gonna go. Just can we get there, please?
Right. Okay. So I think consensus is that it wasn't that good, and I respect that as an opinion, because also me watching this, like some jokes don't age well, as Beatrice mentioned, that there are some jokes, especially with like stereotyping. We've got the kind of homophobic stuff. You got stuff framing the Indian. Like, I think Johnny Depp at some point says, like, your ingenuity. Like, that's such a hacky joke. That, like, as a kid, I probably really enjoyed it. But, like, today, it's like, grown. So, like, I get that. But at the same time, like, Andy, you mentioned that it doesn't go absurd enough. I think that from what other people have described, this is a very weird movie. So, like, in terms of weirdness, I think it satisfies. Like, we're going with a Johnny Depp character. Like, Johnny Depp in himself is a cartoon character. So, putting him in a cartoon is the best function that he could do. Like, in real life, I don't buy him as a person, but as a weird lizard who's, like, thrown into a circumstance that he doesn't fit in, like, I buy Johnny Depp as that because he is a weirdo, and Rango is a weirdo. And, the whole photorealisticness of the movie is just strange compared to the smoothness of stuff like Pixar and DreamWorks that shakes you up. I think this movie is very pretty, and like at the end, like, it gets so surreal with like there's like walking trees, and there's like at the beginning there's a dream sequence where a fish flies through the sky and stuff. So, and like all in between, there's also this strange dialogue that's like a mile a minute. And obviously some of the jokes don't land, but I think some of the jokes are weird enough to land. Like, there's a weird thing about like hemorrhoids being in a tortilla and stuff that, like, I find really funny just because it's out of place. But like, and that's obviously a kind of humor that doesn't land with everybody. But for me, I think that it works just because it's just so strange and so just not like a normal animated PG movie. And somehow they managed to fit it all into this burrito, so to speak. Also, speaking to like the Hispanic stuff, okay. Like I understand now that like some of this stuff is very stereotyped, like to the point like Alfred Molina throwing out amigos a lot. But at the same time, as a kid, I was like, oh hey, there's Spanish in this movie, cool. And like I wouldn't have known any better at the time because I wasn't open enough to other media that represents this much better. But like at the same time, I do enjoy just the whole setting of it, just being in a desert and stuff. But I think where this movie suffers, so while rewatching, is the plot. Like that's just something. It's a Western, and Westerns in general are not. There's not
politically correct.
Well, they're not politically correct, and there's not much room really to negotiate with them in terms of plot. Like, I feel like Western tropes are some of the most heavily hidden tropes of any genre. Like, can anyone give me a Western that's unique? I
not on the spot.
Well,
like
yeah,
this,
not on the
no.
spot. But like, I'm just saying, like, we're
New Vegas.
Wasn't there like a movie with Will Smith that's like Cowboys versus Aliens or something?
Wild West.
It was called Cowboys versus Aliens, and it wasn't good.
Cowboys versus Aliens is Harrison Ford, and Wild Wild West is Will Smith, and those are both very weird movies, I'll admit, because they're combining with sci-fi, right? So like that's one way to do it. That's true.
Could you make the argument that like Star Wars is like a Western in a way?
It is because like Han Solo.
Mad Max Fury Road, that's kind of like a Western.
No, Mad Max Fury Road is not a Western.
No, but you are working with like there's the way to make Westerns interesting in this day and age is to combine them with other genres, right? Because like Star Wars employs Western tropes and infuses them into sci-fi, and Mad Max does it into the post-apocalyptic setting, so that makes it more interesting. But when you're going straight with the Western, it works on so many things that have been done in so many movies, and that's maybe why animation hasn't done Westerns in a long time. Like there's a Home on the Range from the early 2000s, like by Disney.
What?
Does anybody remember Home on the Range?
One with the cows?
Yeah, like Roseanne was in that.
That was a bad
right, and maybe that's working towards the idea that maybe Westerns in animation just doesn't work, which is a possible theory. But I think this does as much as you can do with the Western genre as possible.
So is the issue that we're having here is that it's not really subverting anything? It's just very narratively like just a Western kind of movie.
But I
Is that
mean, I
what
think
you're
that's fair because like Star Wars, like A New Hope is a good movie despite being a very bare bones story. It's not like it's narrative, whatever. But this movie, it does like very basic narrative, but also is very boring at the same time. I don't know what the problem is.
I think it's also because even though, and I know that I mentioned like certain, like in terms of like animation, it animates things well, you know, like the lighting's well, the colors chosen are well. But I think it's more in terms of the creativity with like the world. Like it's as if they tried so hard to make these animals mimic a Western that I would have much rather them just have made it with people because they didn't really necessarily do anything creative with the animals, if that makes any sense.
But
If anything, it was
so
very
creative, though. The rattlesnake was really creative.
the one and what'd you say that you wanted more of it? The one creative thing that you liked. I'm saying like everything before that, even I think we're gonna get into that sequence, but the ride of the Valkyries or whatever sequence, like with the banjos, like that's not even creative either. That's a cliche. Of course they're gonna use banjos, even though despite the fact that banjos are just more country than they are Western. So it's like, sure, why not? So that's what I mean. It's like they're even when I think the reason is that the world building of this isn't that creative. When like they didn't go full into these animals and like I guess they made them so human-like that, or tried desperately to make them so human-like that when they try, I guess they didn't get creative enough with the actual animalness of them. Like even like with certain characters, I didn't know what animal they were because they were under so much hair because they wanted to give them a mustache that they didn't necessarily need or a beard. So I'm just like, you know, I either would have preferred this as just, if they're going to play it straight, I would have rather them had it be humans. And if they were going to do animals, I wanted to get them to get more wacky with the animals, I guess.
I think the character design is going to be one of the more unique and distinctive elements. Looking back on this, that's all we were talking about when we were watching it. So I feel like that's a success because it was so distinctive to us. Even if we're like, why does this person have hair? You know, I think that's a good thing in the end.
Yeah, but then like Beatrice is saying, we also had animals like that one fox secretary lady. It looked like someone out of Zootopia. Like some of these animals look really interesting and unique, and some of them look like they look just stock standard animated animals. They needed to pick something and go with it. They just didn't really pick anything.
Definitely a hodgepodge of styles here in the character design, which I think was pretty interesting.
Yeah, because also like comparing this to Zootopia, like all the animals in Zootopia are under the Disney thing, like they're all so smooth and so like no edges. Like this all feels very gritty, and so like even the fox, like she looks cleaner than compared to the other animals. But if you put her side by side with a Zootopia character, there's no comparison really to me. But I think another thing, going back to what Beatrice said about world building, like I think that the issue is more with the characters themselves than the setting, because I think the setting is beautiful world building. Like it's like all the buildings in the background, the desert is used very beautifully, especially in the second half of the movie. But the characters themselves their actions don't really stand out. Their design does. But as characters, it's hard really to dig into them. And I guess we can start with Rango himself, because obviously he's the titular character here. He's voiced by Johnny Depp, obviously, and so he's whatchamacallit. He's Johnny Depp basically as a cartoon character. He's very fast talking, kind of like a very what's the word? Sam, would you like to describe how you interpreted Rango as a character?
All right, so he was sort of like a fish out of water, right?
Okay.
Except he was a chameleon. He was like, oh, I'm this like privileged fucking chameleon who's like living in a fucking aquarium with a mannequin Barbie doll and all this other shit. And then he gets basically like forced out into the desert, right? And then he's like, oh, I'm the new guy in town and I'm so tough and I'm the sheriff, when he's actually not, because he's just like this dude. I don't know. I'm not really a fan of Rango's character, to be honest. I think it's
he also like sexually assaults people.
Yeah,
okay, we can talk about that. So Johnny Depp in the modern day has been under several sexual assault allegations, and so and so that colors certain things in this movie, where like he kisses Beans, who is the female love interest here. At times she is frozen and so doesn't have control. And Rango cuddles with her and kisses her, and it ends up looking very bad in this day and age. So and in any age really. So that's not a great thing to come out of to be the legacy of this movie. But also just his general quirkiness as a character. Does anybody else have any thoughts or couldn't think of a reason why maybe he doesn't work as a character?
What are we supposed to like Rango? That's my question.
Yeah.
I think the issue is his whole character is that he's acting. He's his whole thing is that he acts. He escapes into acting to find himself. But what that does is that his character is so shallow. It's empty.
He barely has a character, dude.
Yeah, does he really change at all by the end of the movie?
He doesn't.
Because he wants to be I don't know, how I describe it is he wants to be the protagonist, the hero of some story,
yeah.
And then but does he really learn anything along the way about himself? He just ends up, saving the day or whatever by the end. He ends up kind of getting what he wants.
Yeah, because I think that whole spirit of by the way, there's a sequence that he meets the spirit of the West, who is in the form of Clint Eastwood as a human. So that's a thing. But in that sequence, they're trying to get across, right, that Rango has been doing this all for himself and that he should be doing it to help others. But that's not really transmitted throughout the movie. I don't think so. I can understand Rango. He begins wanting to be a hero. He ends becoming a hero. So at the end, he's just being rewarded for all his actions by the end of the thing. And that doesn't feel great considering that he's going through the whole liar revealed thing where he's gotten his lies through, but just because okay, well, now that I lied, now everybody knows, well, I gotta fulfill the thing anyway. So here, I'll just make this plan. So it's,
Can I go back to something Sarah was saying?
Sure.
Sarah, Rango's hot rod. That's all he is.
This is a Transformers reference, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Dude, you're so fucking. I thought you were talking about Andy Samberg.
Yeah, what about the Andy Samberg hot rod? I was I like Andy Samberg and hot rod a lot more than Rango here.
No, but Sarah, aren't I right? He's just a piece of shit. He's just a piece of shit.
He's terrible.
Is he supposed to be unsympathetic? I don't know. I don't understand.
I think the movie is trying.
Hot Rod is supposed to be sympathetic in the movie,
but he's just bad.
I think in here,
he killed Optimus Prime.
Okay, no one understands the stupid Transformers movie. Okay,
we're trying to get across this because we never will be able to share our Transformers.
We understand
podcast.
that. Yeah,
Sarah gets what I'm doing now.
So Rango is a piece of shit. I guess we can go with that. That we also have Beans, voiced by Isla Fisher. She is I guess she serves as the tough girl in town who ends up being the love interest of the main character. So in that sense, she's also fairly shallow too as a character.
Yeah, here's the thing. I also don't like Beans, and this is the character I should like because I always like this character. The tough female character, but I didn't think she had anything going for her. This was a pretty shallow character too.
She has a literal physical thing where her agency is taken away, Dylan. All the time. It's what happens. Every 5 minutes she's in a scene, her agency is taken away by her stupid freezing thing.
Yeah, but once she does it of her own accord, so that's
once she does it of her own accord, she gets sexually assaulted. It's great.
I think the problem is that I don't buy. None of these characters have meaningful relationships with each other. Even the villains, there's nothing there. There's no sense of loyalty. There's no sense of I actually bought sort of the relationship between Rango and Miss Beans. Had I actually bought the relationship between Rango and the little girl or animal that I can't quite place, voiced by Abigail Breslin is all I know how to distinguish her. I don't know. I just find it that I don't find a connection between any of these characters. When there's no connection, then they're just standing there. I have no investment in them.
But Beatrice, the rattlesnake tipped his hat to Rango.
Oh, right. Of course. But no, that's what I mean. It's just there's just a kind of emptiness. And I feel like part of the reason why Rango isn't sympathetic, part of the reason why people like me and Dylan, who are supposed to love characters like Miss Beans or Bean, I don't know if it's singular or plural.
I think it's plural.
Well,
yeah, it's plural.
Like these are the characters that we naturally gravitate towards, and because there is nothing there, like there is nothing. Like, all I know about is that her dad died, but I don't even like show me a flashback or something of the guy.
I will agree that like Beans kind of disappears for half the movie when we're going into whole posse stuff. So by the time we get to the night scene where they're like watching the moon or something, and they like get that connection, you're like, well, what happened here? Because the last time we saw them, they were in the town together and they're like avoiding eye contact. Beans just joins the posse, and then like the posse is just its own thing. Like nobody really stands out. They're all vessels for like the various jokes, which I think there are a couple funny jokes in there, but you're doing that at the expense of developing any character for them because they're all just Western hicks pretty much. So like,
let's talk about Rango and Beans while you're talking about that scene, because if we've not talked about it enough, that was I feel like this is one of the worst straight romances I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of bad ones. There's no connection, and then they kiss. And earlier in the movie, we're like, if they kiss, this is going to be the worst thing ever, and they did nothing to improve it from that point. And then that scene was just gross. And I don't get it. I don't get why, unless they're commenting on the female lead, male lead like type thing, which I don't really think they were doing, then I'm not sure why this was a good idea.
Right. Sarah, do you have any thoughts on the Beans Rango connection here?
They didn't have a connection, Alex. There was none. Where did this romance come from? I don't understand. I don't relate. I can't get it.
She was the only female character besides like Abigail Breslin,
should be noted. There's
fucking get together, right?
Should be noted. Most people are male in this movie.
Yeah, exactly,
as expected.
I'm just gonna say there was no romance in Transformers, so I have nothing for this.
That's your only frame of reference, Andy?
Okay. I mean, there were no robots in this movie at all. So like, how are you able to relate to anything?
Well, no, the rattlesnake had a really cool like robot tail. I liked that.
Okay, so Rattlesnake Jake is the best character of this movie. I'm willing to go out there.
It's at least the best character design. That's like 100%.
But like,
sure.
also, he's a menacing villain. Bill Nye does perfectly in delivering his lines. Like, "I'll take you straight to hell." Like it jars you when you're watching the movie. I think that his design helps a lot, and also like the whole showdown scene at the end, I think is serviceable because of the fact that he's the one on the other side alongside Rango. So I think that Rattlesnake Jake is a very important part to like this movie being even watchable, because obviously you had to last for the entire.
What do you mean even watchable? You love this movie.
Well, I love this movie, but I'm saying for the other people, like even people who don't like this movie, I think that most of them would enjoy Rattlesnake Jake regardless, because I think that he's just a good example of what a villain is like. The mayor we'll talk about later, but like Rattlesnake Jake is a good villain here.
I think the mayor is fine.
The mayor has like no character though, dude.
Yeah, I take no character over bad character.
I don't know. I think at least bad character means like they like thought about it a little bit, right?
Okay, that's a fair point. He was I don't know. I guess he was obviously the villain the whole time, but
also there was like weird golf stuff with him. I didn't get that.
Yeah, golf? Like what the fuck is that about, dude?
Also, the other mention golf, can we mention like the other thing about the aesthetic of this movie? The scale of this movie is just, they can't pick anything. They can't pick anything for like the size of anything. Like, the pill bugs are too small. They somehow have tiny guns and tiny bottles, but there's also giant pill boxes. Like, what the fuck? How does this work?
Look, it all works according to like how they can do a joke out of it. So like, I'm fine with that. I don't really care about.
That's such bullshit, though. You know it.
I mean, maybe it is, but like, I think that if the movie was funny enough, then you wouldn't pay attention to it. But if you're not getting the jokes, then obviously that bothers more, because it's like, well, they're doing it for the purpose of the joke, but it's not being funny. So then why do it at all? Or why play with it at all? Just keep it straight. So I think it matters a lot in execution, like those kind of complaints for sure. But I guess we can talk a little bit more about the mayor. I mean, he's a turtle. I think his introduction is interesting because like they're playing it sort of like him being grateful to Rango for killing the hawk, but he's still doing the whole menacing tone of like, hey, you control the water, you control everything. The town needs something to believe in. But like he's working a close in between into being like not on Rango's side, but like he's also not tipping his hand totally. The one thing I don't like is that they put they show him with Bad Bill so early in the film. Like I think that kind of just it shows your audience that you don't trust them that much to pick it up later on in the golf scene. Like, but as soon as you show that, you're like, okay, well, he's going to be a bad guy. But I think if you leave that out, that first scene might have gone past, like, okay, well, he's like sort of okay until you get later in the movie. But, what are your guys' opinions on the mayor? Beatrice, we'll go to you here.
I mean, I think it was kind of a missed opportunity in terms of hyping up the drama, hyping up the sense of mystery, and hyping up like, ooh, like who's the true bad guy behind all this? Because even like at the end, when Rattlesnake Jake turns on him, it's I don't know. I saw it coming. It wasn't that exciting. Like this plot wasn't that interesting. Whereas, for instance, with say, again, I don't want to compare it to this to something that is drastically so much better. But Zootopia, the big twist with the villain, like for instance, like I saw it coming, but what I loved was how the reactions were fast and how all this was happening and how even though the impact the twist had on all the characters that I grew to love. So for me with it, I just think with him, it's a missed opportunity. I think really it was here you had, you know, something cliche, something typical. It's like the politician, the mayor who's actually behind, who starts off as being overly accommodating, ends up being the one going evil. But even if it's cliche, like it's better that than to just be so upfront about it and then take out all the error, all the drama, all the tension out of the story.
Okay. Dylan, you seem to be sort of positive about the mayor. What are your thoughts on him, or do you have any thoughts on him?
He's fine. I think his voice acting was pretty on point and reminded me of previous better villains played by his voice actor. But I don't know. He did not actively enrage me like the character Rango at several points in the movie. So that's points in his favor.
All right. So I guess what we've talked about the main characters, and I guess we can go through the story if there is one. Like we're introduced. We're introduced to this movie by the singing owls, and I feel like you guys complained a lot more about the owls than I anticipated. Like I think that they're just
oh yeah, fuck those guys. They're such little assholes. Like who cares, man? They serve no point.
Well, what's our verdict on the owls? Because we were speculating that they were psychological manifestations of Rango, and only Rango could see them. But then at several points, you guys were like, "Oh, other people can see them." So what do we think happened in the end?
I think the owls suck, and it doesn't.
What? That's not. Alex, you're the Rango expert. Solve this mystery for us.
I mean, I think they're real because, like, when Rango's leaving the town, they're like packing up their guitars, like they're disappointed in Rango. That could be Rango showing self guilt or something like that. But I think that act is kind of like, well, we're leaving the movie because Rango failed or something.
So the owls are Rango's manifestation of his ability to be a hero, you're saying, or some shit like that.
Maybe. Like I can buy the whole like they're
I just made that shit up on the spot. Don't agree with me.
I mean, a lot of this is made up on the spot. A lot of interpretations about this movie. This movie gets very surreal at times. Like, also, there's the opening dream sequence. He's wandering through the desert. He falls asleep in a pipe. And he dreams of, like, the cactuses turning into rattlesnake tails. And there's his floating fish friend is like, where are your amigos now? Or like, just like hammering home that he's like totally alone and stuff. But like, from the very beginning, it like starts to nudge you into that surrealist stuff. He kind of abandons that for most of the movie. But then like in the last act, like it begins getting surreal again with like Rango walking through the desert. He's walking across the road with sad music. He gets taken by pill bugs. He meets a random Clint Eastwood ghost person. There's walking trees. So like I think you mentioned earlier, it was probably Andy, that like it doesn't go all the way into surrealism. And I think that is an interesting thing to think about. Like, what if Rango, the entire movie was like that? Where like we weren't going for the whole anthropomorphic animals looking like humans and just like stayed in dream sequence mode for most of the movie. Like, would this be more interesting to watch? Like, dude, could we just get rid of the story? We could, maybe we could, but
like, are you saying like
the story? I think you need to explain the story to me.
I
like
think that's what we're stuck on, Alex.
I guess the whole
slice of life anime.
Yeah, like the whole town missing water thing, because that feels like that's occupying most of the middle of this movie. We're hunting down the water, but like what?
It's more than the middle. It's more than the middle.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I
it's
do
the
think
beginning, middle, and a little bit of the end.
No, I think the beginning with Rango like in the thing, and then crashing out of the thing in the car, and then like finding the town. I feel like even though we made fun of it, that was ultimately more interesting to me than kind of this cliched water plot line. Like that at least was like, what the fuck is this? You know, like that was kind of like had an air of mystery to it, and the psychological vibe that was kind of complex.
Yeah, I mean, I would have preferred like a movie of Rango just kind of trying to figure out how to survive in the desert, coming from a very like safe environment to a very harsh environment, and then having to figure it out, and then making friends along the way, and then somehow still pursuing his actor dreams and stuff, and you know, finding peace at home in the desert, and maybe, I don't know, meeting like a wild chameleon and learning about his instincts and stuff. Like that to me would have been a more interesting movie. But by asking that, it's like by doing away with all the Western stuff and then doing a more completely different thing.
Yeah, but I asked that because it does feel like two different genres, because I think that when it goes into the surrealism, like it stops being the Western, and that's where it ends up like avoiding the tropes. Like at least when it goes into surrealism, it's not stuff that's totally expected. It's more, what the fuck is this? But that's a little better than like going through the story for 50 minutes and you're like, okay, well this is gonna happen, then this is gonna happen. Okay, he's been revealed. Now what? Like, and so. Like that, but the little pieces where it kind of deviates from the whole Western stuff is where I think that it has more potential to be interesting. But like, I just want to point those out because I do think that the surreal scenes, at least for me, like are interesting at least. So I enjoy those portions, but there's also like a meta-ness to the beginning as well. Rango is reciting this whole play thing. It's like the hero cannot exist in a vacuum. He needs an unexpected twist that pushes him into conflict and stuff. And that sort of gets touched on upon every so often in this movie too. Like, we mentioned the owls being sort of a fourth wall breaker. Also, I feel like Rango mentions that. Also, when he meets beings, like he's mentioning stuff like, "Oh, my pseudonym and my avatar" and things like that. So, like, I think that also if it dives into the meta-ness more, that might be at least a little bit more interesting too.
Yeah, I think for me, another part of the movie related to this that worked looking back is the bar scene where he gets his name. Because even though we're like, oh my god, like this is
for reference for those who haven't watched it, it's Rango because he has a bottle that says "Hecho en Durango," made in Durango, but he just covers his thumb on the "do" part, so it just says Rango.
Yeah, that scene is like him creating this confident identity, and I do think that's ultimately more interesting. Like him, he is only on his own before, and he has no sense of self, and then kind of developing this fake sense of self, which I'm not sure we ever really comment on or hold him accountable for, honestly. But yeah, I do think that and previous scenes ended up being more interesting looking back.
I think that might have been the best scene in the movie, honestly, Dylan, which is really sad.
Which is really sad.
Well, it's also a particularly pretty scene. Like I think the lighting in that bar is very interesting.
Yeah.
That's our first intro to the characters. Like just seeing all of them, all the side characters of Dirt. Like seeing all the
Which
weird
there
animals.
are too many.
Maybe there are too many, but like I think that the effect of just seeing them all in this one tight place in the dark with like those creaky fan and stuff, like that's all very like it attracts the eye. The problem is you're seeing them too much later on in the movie, where like we'd be better served focusing on other characters. But I think as background characters, like it's an affecting scene. But yeah, also that scene does introducing to Rango finding his identity, and theoretically that's a theme of this movie, except that we don't really get into that. So, but he is taken into Dirt. He tells off this Bad Bill character who shows up for this one scene. I think he's got like an Australian accent voice. He shoots fire at him. Did somebody say they were shipping him and Rango? I forget. Did somebody mention that? And
probably me. I don't remember who you're talking about, but I probably said that.
They have fun interaction. Rango shoots fire at him. Then he slaps him with a towel. Like I thought that was good physical humor. But they get into the showdown. The hawk shows up again. There was a hawk scene earlier. I guess that looking back on this, there probably are too many chase scenes. Like I think Beatrice, you've commented on this before in other animated movies that we kind of lean on the chase scene too much. How did you feel about like these chase scenes in this movie?
I mean, for me, when it was him versus the hawk, I was entertained, and I think the problem with this movie is that it's the longer it goes on, the more it loses me. So in that first chase scene, or maybe I don't know if that's the first one, but that one to me is, I guess, the strongest of the chase scenes. And then it's that big major one, again, the Rise of the Valkyries one. To me, I was just completely removed from. I just didn't. By that point, the film had lost me. So even though I would my eyes would drift away from the screen, like in those moments, in those gaps where I wasn't looking at the movie, when I look back, like I wasn't lost. So to me, it wasn't time used effectively. It wasn't super like, oh wait, what just happened with this chase sequence? It's like, how did they go from here to here? It wasn't really that. It was just a lot of it felt pretty monotonous. And given its placement in the overall scheme of the film, that to me was that should have been the main chase sequence. And they do rely on them a lot, but that's more a problem with a tendency that animation has in general than just with this film.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the gorge scene, so I guess we'll skip that since I think that there are a couple of opinions here about that. But basically, there are these mole men who are being accused of stealing the water from the bank. The leader is voiced by Harry Dean Stanton, and so the posse shows up. They do this whole play scene thing, and they end up attracting the entire mole family. And so we have this whole chase scene that's kind of modeled after the ship scenes in Star Wars where they're going down into the gorge, but it's to score to Ride of the Valkyries, but with banjos and the other country instruments, I suppose. Sam, do you remember this scene at all? No?
A little bit. I don't know. Red as the Valkyries, man. That's weird. I don't know, dude. It's a lot.
I think it would have been better, and Sarah might agree with me, if they played a cheesy 80s pop song during this.
Go away with your Transformers. Stop trying to make this a stealth Transformers podcast.
Dare would have been a great song to play here.
Who are 80s country artists? Dolly Parton, I guess.
Yeah, Dolly Parton and like, what's his face? That guy she did the duet with.
Kenny Rogers.
Yeah, bro.
They should have basically what they should have done is played "Achy Breaky Heart" throughout that entire scene.
Islands in the Stream.
Islands in the Stream. So, yes, yeah. I suppose. I don't know. As a kid, I love this, but like today, I get that it's hacky. Like it's a parody of many scenes that use the same music. So I get that now. I remember really liking this scene when I was little. So this is an eye opener. But so that whole scene happens, and to figure out that nobody actually had the water, and so we get the whole golf scene that somebody referenced earlier, where the mayor pretty much reveals like, "Hey, I'm not suspicious at all," but he actually is suspicious. And Rattlesnake Jake is called. Rattlesnake Jake pushes Rango out, and I think that, as we mentioned before, this whole part where like Rango abandons the whole dirtness, all the side characters, and he's just alone with his thoughts, like that ends up going back to the original theme of the movie, which is like him trying to find an identity for himself. And so I think that that's where the movie like should be focused, but loses its focus during the most of the movie. But at least in these final scenes, it tries to get back to that. Does anybody?
But
yeah, Randy.
The problem is that it doesn't really like even like pay off that. That's the problem. It doesn't explore it at all. It starts to, but then he just goes back to the same boring character he was when he goes saves the town. There's no real growth.
Yeah, that was my point earlier. He doesn't feel like he's a different character. Like
he's hot
by the end.
He doesn't grow at all.
Yeah, he doesn't have much of a change in motivation, right? Because at the very like that spirit of the West scene, like it tries to portray it as like he's been doing it only for himself, but that he should be doing it for other people. But like I don't really get the sense that he's selfish per se in the first half of this movie. Like he's more just kind of like trying to play along to avoid getting caught. But I don't know if that's selfish in itself or like. I don't really get that vibe from him in the beginning, so like it's kind of hard to make that connection with the final scene there where they're basically trying to lay it out for you.
I mean, I think the problem is that, like, you know, if we're trying to show that he actually cares about is doing it for other people, but like they weren't really able to really show the relationships very effectively and make them more than anything just like really shallow. So like, because we weren't articulating thoughts is a thing.
But does this movie articulate thoughts?
The relationships were pretty shallow. So how are you supposed to feel those connections that he had to the other characters in order to show that he cared about them and was doing it for them instead of himself?
Right. So, like, because of this lack of character stuff, we come down to the showdown, but it's kind of focused mainly just on the visuals as well. Like, you got Rattlesnake Jake and his whole rattliness. Rango shows up to save the day. I do like the scene where Rattlesnake Jake is threatening Beans in the mayor's office, just because I think that's another example, like just all out villainous that I think that this kind of movie needs, especially considering the grittiness that it's been trying to go through for most of the movie. But Rango lures him out, and they have the fight. He has wrangled up the mole people to be a distraction. The water shows up. And they eventually save the day, and the movie is over. There's an extended, and the theatrical ending of the movie is just like, hey, Rango saved the day. The extended ending is kind of like them having a lake town, and like the side characters doing goofy stuff.
It's called Mud Town now instead of Dirt Town.
Yeah, it's called Mud.
Get it?
Is it because dirt plus water equals mud?
I think so.
Wow.
OMG.
I got it. Okay.
The frog says something about I'm urinating right now. Once again, as a kid, this is a very good joke, but as an adult, this is like, wow.
Did you mention the prostate joke already? Because that was something.
I don't think we mentioned it specifically. We probably referenced it twice in this podcast. But yes, there are several out there jokes involving bodily functions, including the prostate joke. And the doctor shows up like, who needs a checkup? And he sticks the glove on his finger.
There's also a joke about the Plan B pill.
Oh, yeah.
I hated that.
I wanted...
That was my least favorite moment.
Well, was it your least favorite just because of the joke or because it was juxtaposed with the final kiss?
That all of that.
Yeah.
That was just fucking awful. Never bring it up again in your life.
Okay.
I have to admit, that moment almost made me want to just stop the movie. I was so...
Well, you're like 10 minutes away, so at least you...
I know, that's the only thing that kept me watching, honestly.
You survived. But, so I think we've covered most of the movies.
Alex, here's what I want to know, because we kind of had groupthink watching this all together, so we obviously came away not particularly feeling it. But, we had a similar shared experience, and you've had a different experience watching this, and you love the movie. So, what have we not talked about, I feel like, that you really connect with in this?
I don't like. I feel like the dialogue when you're watching it alone, there's so many. They're throwing so many jokes. Like in a group, I think the bad jokes stand out a lot more because we point them out, right? So when there are good jokes, they kind of just pass by because we're busy talking about the bad jokes. And I feel like there are good jokes in here, especially all the stuff that Rango says. Right now, I'm a bit under the influence to not really remember specific ones. But also, I think that just watching this movie, looking at it is just a different experience from watching other movies. At least to me, I consider animation an art in a way. And I think that in terms of just aesthetic, in terms of how the characters look, how the setting looks, how the desert looks, it's all just very interesting to watch. It's a very artistic piece of media, and I think that it's funny enough for me to to even today, I would still enjoy watching this on my own. But I do think at the same time, when you're watching it in a group, it stands out more, both the bad jokes and the fact that there's no story. So I'm more, maybe I have a lower threshold. I can survive having no story if the stuff is funny, but it stands out more when you're watching with other people. So at least I think that's my thing. Rango is a pretty movie for still, but it's maybe not as funny as I remembered it to be watching it today.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the definitive take group of experts here, given the conditions of watching.
And also, I'd like to think that I have a weirder sense of humor than most people. I find some things funny that other people don't find funny, and I find things not funny that other people find funny a lot. So, maybe this is just a weird thing where, the humor clicks with a very minority group of people. I don't know. But also, I have not watched Rango with other people before, so maybe it's just me. I don't know. But
I will say about the art thing you talked about. We compared this to Zootopia a few times. Both furry movies. And this is a much more distinctive art style. This is so much better looking than Zootopia. I will say
100%.
Zootopia is just pretty homogenous looking, and this is just so crazy and weird. And I can buy it even just on that level.
It's such a weird movie overall, because also if you look into the behind the scenes, the Gore Verbinski made these actors actually act out all the scenes with costumes and everything, and but not even using them for motion capture. He just animates the characters around them. So it's animated.
Wait, elaborate on that. What do you? He didn't use the acting. They made him act it out, but not for motion capture, for the voices.
Yeah, just for the voices and for the characters.
Wait.
The behind the scenes footage is wild, man. They show the play scene where Johnny Depp is in a dress and all.
What?
They made Johnny Depp put on a dress.
Yes, they did. They did.
not tell us?
Why did we see that? That's great.
Yeah, man. I wonder, and it has a very school play vibe. Like this is like what high schools would do in practice behind the stage, maybe.
Did they just lie to Johnny Depp and tell him they were filming and they weren't?
Yeah, this is a live action movie, Johnny Depp.
I mean, I don't know. While I'm here,
I honestly am mad at you that you didn't tell me this ahead of time.
That would have improved our experience, yeah, knowing that happened.
just imagining Johnny Depp like walking through the desert or something.
Yeah, I think so.
I would have been that the whole time.
Well,
I would have been like, they wanted him to get into character, so they just released him into the desert with no water for like a day.
While we're here also in watching the behind the scenes, I found that Isla Fisher was the one who suggested breast enhancements for Beans, so blame her that she has boobs, I guess.
Well, how would that come up? Why would she?
I didn't
Isla
even notice,
Fisher.
to be honest. I was too,
Yeah,
I don't know if the
obsessed
right
with
word
the
is
eyes.
mesmerized by her eyes, but like that was,
Yeah, her eyes are
Okay,
the.
can I mention this? Like when animation gets better, there's like Uncanny Valley stuff, right?
Right.
Well, movies like Zootopia, they don't look as good as this movie, but they don't hit that Uncanny Valley. And what happens is eyes are like the hardest thing to animate, but these animals are very hyper realistic, and their eyes take up like 30 to 40 to almost 50% of face real estate.
And I kind of
they
like
don't-
that.
They don't look good. They're
It's
so
definitely intentional. Like, I don't think they want these characters to look appealing. Like, that's the crazy part.
Well,
they don't feel it, but it's like they should have made them more gross. They didn't go all the way.
I mean, there was a bird with an arrow through his eye and conjunctivitis. Like, you want to say that the characters weren't dirty enough?
Like that was fucking cool. I'll admit, like that was some like real fucking shit right
It was
there.
struck by Cupid.
The
Why would-
boobs on like the frogs and the lizards, though, not so much.
I mean, let's also talk about this. This is a PG movie. There are hookers. There's smoking. There's a snake saying "Go to hell." Like it's and this goes to Gore Verbinski at the time. He was like, "Hey, like we should be making more adult animated movies," but like at the time that wasn't really a thing that was being done in feature films. So it feels like this is the closest he was able to go before like getting to PG-13. Today, you would be more allowed to do something more over the edge, like something like Sausage Party or Anomalisa. Like those are.
Oh yeah, we need more sausage party.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of R-rated or PG-13.
Better or worse than Sausage Party, Rango?
Way better. Way better.
It's sausage.
Fuck Sausage Party. Fuck that movie.
Okay, we have guaranteed
Right
that Sausage
now.
Party is our next After Dark podcast. Thank you, Sam.
No!
Oh god.
But yeah, so like in the run up to like promoting this movie, I get the sense that he wanted to make a more adult movie than this, but like this is the closest he was able to get. So I also want to put out like, would have making this movie more adult have helped it at all, or is that just something that like ends up not being helpful?
I think that's the worst part of this movie, honestly. Like,
Yeah,
it
I
just,
agree.
it doesn't help it at all. They need to work on the story before they work on their stupid jokes.
And I think it's possible that the stuff that didn't land for us about the adultness themes would have landed better if they had more room with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out because it stands out, like considering stuff like the Disney and Pixar. Like at the time, like there was some controversy, especially about the smoking. Well, why is there smoking in a kids movie? I'm like, but it's like a Western and stuff.
What voice is that?
It was a complaining father that apparently doesn't smoke.
In the 50s?
Wait,
I thought they smoked more then.
Yeah, Dylan, didn't you know this movie was written in the 50s? And they found the script in like
Really could have been written in the 50s. I mean, the gender politics of the movie are straight out of the 50s, but I'm okay.
I mean, it's a Western, and the Western apparently has not adapted to the modern age. I think we can establish that. But yeah, in the end, Rango is a movie that I think that it is worth watching because just in terms of its uniqueness, and I think that it's possible that the humor will land with some people, and like it's not. I think it's still a good movie, but Like, would you guys at all, I guess you probably wouldn't watch it again, but like, would you recommend it to someone who hasn't watched it? Like, we'll go to Beatrice first here.
I mean, it depends on the person.
I would say if it's like a dude.
Yeah, if it's a dude bro who wears a snapback, then I'd be like, sure, give it a go. But I don't know. I just personally, I mean, I would definitely give it to someone who say is kind of bored of the current state of animation, where everything kind of looks the same, everything kind of animation style wise and stuff, and they're just kind of tired of the Pixar Disney equation. I would recommend it just simply because, like, hey, here's something that looks different and actively want to look different, and actually was animated well, like had the budget to compare with these other studio films, and could look and it looks great. Is visually something to look at, but I also wouldn't recommend this to, say, a child. I wouldn't recommend this for a family night because, I don't know, like, honestly, like, even, like, certain, like, I don't know, I just personally, even, like, for instance, certain, if we're going to focus on, say, like, the gender politics and all that stuff, like, there are some Disney movies of, like, way back when that gender politics-wise aren't the greatest, but I'm like, well, at least those have historical value. Rango, the only thing that has a value for me is just purely on the visuals, maybe on the voice acting a little bit, like the voice acting itself. Like, again, I couldn't really hear it, so I can't really base it on that. But if it's as you say, like in terms of like what they had to do to get those performances out of those actors, then it's like, that's something new. That's something different. Let's compare that. So I would recommend this movie to someone who is in the industry, who wants to be an animator or who wants to be a voice director or whatever. Absolutely. It's not, for me, I don't see this as like the most mainstream of movies. So to a mainstream audience, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it.
Got the Oscar. How did it get that without having mainstream?
Okay, I guess I mentioned that at the beginning. I guess we could talk about that real quick. So, as I mentioned earlier, Rango is the last movie not made by Disney or Pixar.
What was the competition?
Yeah, let's read it out here. So we got A Cat in Paris. I have not watched that. Chico,
I have no idea what that is.
It's a foreign movie.
Chico and Rita.
Got it.
Another foreign one, yeah.
Okay, now here are the two major players. Puss in Boots, which I actually think is a good movie, actually. But like,
I have never seen it.
Yeah, and Kung Fu Panda 2, which I think is the most mainstream.
That
of
is
these movies.
not the strongest competition. So
Which
I can see
one's
why
Kung Fu Panda 2? Is that the one with the stupid crane?
Yes,
and, like,
that
the
is Gary Oldman as the crane.
Okay.
So, like, considering that...
Wait, no, not the crane, the duck. Is that the one with the duck?
Well, Poe's dad is a duck. Is that what you're thinking of?
Okay, no, stop getting into Kung Fu Panda.
Okay, the point is, Kung Fu Panda 2, the villain is like a peacock. Oh, no, it's a peacock. It's a peacock.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, peacock.
Yeah,
that's
the peacock voiced by Gary Oldman. But, so considering that, and Disney's entry that year was Cars 2, but that didn't get nominated. So.
That's really depressing.
Okay, I have a hot take.
Okay.
I might have liked Cars 2 better than this.
Wow.
Wow. That's a lot from Dylan to admit that.
Cars 2 is fine. I don't hate Cars 2. Okay, anyway.
But Kung Fu Panda, so would you also like it more than Kung Fu Panda?
Cars 2 had the...
I did see Kung Fu Panda 2. I don't remember it, so I really can't comment at all on Kung Fu Panda 2.
Sam?
Dude, Cars 2 had the Pope-mobile, right?
I think so, yes.
I don't...
Yeah, so Dylan, like, I don't know what the fuck you're thinking about.
I only saw it in theaters, and this was 2011, so it's been a while.
Money to see Cars 2.
Well,
yes.
You traded.
Okay, well, considering I haven't seen any of those other movies, I would say, like, Rango is fine then, but, is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess, without having seen those foreign films, that they were better than this.
Probably,
it's
yeah.
possible, yeah. But, yeah, so, but because of that year, like, Rango is going to stay in the record books, whether you like it or not, but, like, I guess is there something to be said for, like, movies, well, I guess we know why Disney dominates. It's like a company politics, like that they just have a more stronger hold on the Oscar voting than they used to, maybe, or things like that.
I mean, you do.
Yeah, so like I guess we can't really say anything about like should other studios have better chances at this than Rango. Like, is Rango really the last movie that we're gonna go with? But
I mean, if you look at it from a more optimistic perspective, like having that be the last one, I mean, it shows that like, oh, the last movie to have been awarded something before Disney retook its kind of like chokehold on the Academy was the one that looks visually different, the one that was trying to not look pretty, and was trying to just be its own style, and the one that was actually a hard PG, and the one that got into a smoking controversy, and the one that, sure, maybe in terms of like political correctness isn't the greatest, but the one that tried to do something different, So it's like, sure, the story left something for me to be desired, but like looking at the things that I like about the movie, it says something that, oh, here's something that actually is different. And like and look how sad it is that the last time it was rewarded for being different and not being something that is predictable from Disney. I'm kind of over Disney animation at the moment and Pixar because I just don't like the monopoly they have created. So,
Yeah, I think it's more than them in terms of the visual homogeny. It's like every single major animation release these years. Like the Rango is so much more visually distinct than almost anything released in the past 5 years in an animation slate.
Like,
so in that regard,
DreamWorks
it's like.
in.
Yeah, no, DreamWorks. I don't know. I mean, all these
Blue Sky,
Sony, like
Illumination.
Blue Sky, Illumination. They all really do look very similar. So I think there is a satisfactory element to wrangling. That being said, the Oscar Best Picture winner is all politics. It's not like represented. So I think Rango probably won because Johnny Depp. Like, I don't think it was any major factor. The nominations are more representative of quality, although that has gone away with the rule change in recent years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's going to conclude our discussion for Rango for tonight. Thank you very much.
Oh, for tonight?
joining.
We're going to talk about this again?
Join us on Discord to talk about something.
Alex will never stop talking about this movie. So.
Okay, that's a good point.
I mean, after tonight, you guys have made me think. So I'll maybe I'll tamp down. I don't know, but I think I've at least settled on the consensus that it's a pretty movie that maybe is lacking in other parts, but like at least I can still live with the fact that it's pretty. And maybe that some days that's all I need, maybe. But
deep.
Yeah, I don't. No, it's not deep at all. Shut up, Dylan.
Alex, can I just say, like, it's okay for you to like this movie. Like, don't apologize for liking it. Like, embrace your joy of it. If it brings you joy, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, in the future, I'll probably forget about. I'm drunk anyway, so like, in the future, I'll probably forget about this ever happened. But like,
You're gonna wake Alex. You're gonna wake up tomorrow, like, edit this, and be like, "Whoa, people didn't like this movie."
Yeah. But hey, if you're listening out there and you've watched this movie, or you decided to watch it based on our glowing recommendations here, let us know. As Beatriz mentioned on Discord, we have at overlyanimated.com/Discord. You can chat with us about animated movies or any other animated topic you want to talk with us about there. You can also find previous discussions that we've had on animated shows and films at overlyanimated.com. If you've listened this far, it's most likely that you like our work in general, and we would always appreciate any financial support you want to give us in that case on Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to all of our patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Taylor, aka Needle.
That's appropriate.
Hi, Needle. I hope you.
He's the only one that's still listening. So.
Needle, watch Transformers.
Don't tell him that.
So that's
everybody watch Transformers. Better, Dylan?
See,
worse.
If you become a patron of the podcast, maybe you too can get personal recommendations at the end of podcasts. So join up, please. And thanks to our Patreon executive producers, John Ryan, Stephen Hugh. Besides these After Dark podcasts, we actually do serious podcasts on like animated movies. You can go find our Incredibles 2 podcast from earlier this year, as well as animated programs. We cover stuff from Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon. You feel free to look through overtheanimated.com to look at some of our more analytical work. Although I think we did a good job today with Rango, even under the influence of various liquids. So thank you guys. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Beatrice. Liquids. Thank you, Andy. Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Dylan. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, how are you, by the way? I'm sorry.
How am I?
Are you doing okay?
I'm doing just fine.
Okay, well, we'll give you the final word. Well, what do you think about Rango?
I mean, I didn't wake up today. It's my birthday, and I was like, I did not wake up today and think I'm gonna watch Rango today. And it was definitely not something that I had anticipated. It was all I can say. It was an experience. And
Sarah, hot seat. Is it better or worse than Transformers?
Stop transferring.
You know what? We'll end it with that. The poster says, "Sarah, it was an experience." There you go.
Yeah.
That's
Alex
Rango in a nutshell.
Alex does wake up on his birthday and say, "I'm gonna watch Rango." So
That is 100%.
It's Alex's birthday and it's his fucking favorite movie. Shut up.
that
It's
is
his life.
I would say the experience was really watching it with everybody and all of our various takes on it. But the movie also had some interesting aspects as well.
The movie was interesting, according to Sarah. There we go. That's our final take. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Adios.
Bye.
Adios.
Goodbye, everybody.
I'm so sorry.
Nice.